I didn't have the intro or anything booted. I guess, I don't know. I just didn't feel like it today. This is episode 30. This is, I like to say this is grade A content, but, we are, just like the other YouTubers in the ufology world. And not only, show isn't just about ufology, it's about more about the cringe and the weird. And we've covered that in this podcast. If you've been listening, I know we don't have like a hell of a lot of regulars, but we do have people that do hit up the YouTube channel quite a bit after we stream. There was a lot of stuff that happened in the UFO week, and I do want to get into a new avenue of propulsion that these guys might actually be doing. And it's nothing like I was actually asking a guy who used to work, he was somebody in the Navy, but it's not how you think. And he was a more of a physics guy, and I'll get into a little bit of that. And this guy flipped my lid, but he might be onto something about how these things are going on. And but let's go into what happened in the Mexican Congress. There was not sure about if we talked about it last show. It's been a week or so, and I don't really remember. But there was Ryan Graves was there. There were some other big names in ufology, but Jaime Maussan, that's been known for. I don't even want to go there because a lot of these podcasts are focusing more on how many hoaxes he's been involved with. I do think the guy legit thinks that he's got the real deal here. I'm still up in the air, but there seems to be something in translation that's not right. People aren't aware that there are more than just one of these alien bodies that were found, or whatever these things are. I'm not saying they're alien at this point. The initial lab results on what was originally found on the website in Peru and the Gaia funding and all that, those are different bodies. I found that out about 2 hours ago. And he's not the only person saying that, and I heard it from straight from the horse's mouth as somebody who was down there in Mexico at the thing. So the body that was done with the DNA testing, and everybody says that this thing couldn't walk, and the bones are all messed up, and yada yada yada. That's a fine theory, but I saw the CT scan of the new one that's being shown. And I do have a medical background, and I do agree with what I saw in the CT scan, that these bones form naturally. They aren't placed together. They're as detailed in the ligaments. I do agree with the pathology report that this thing had mobility problems. I did see that on the right hip. And probably might have had some issues with the same hand on that side. And I'm thinking either A, injury, or B, genetic. I can't really tell, from one CT scanner. You'd have to get an MRI, and it's hard to tell stuff post-mortem on what is going on with the body. But the bones aren't being placed there. Whatever these bones and the way that they are in the necrotic tissue is real, and what everybody was seeing on the skin was not cake or whatever the hell they've been saying. Most likely they're using silica to keep the moisture out of the same thing you have in your beef jerky. Probably just fine down to a very fine sand, because they kind of want it to get into the porous membranes of even necrotic tissue can get wet. So they're probably like that just for transportation. But I did see the necrotic tissue. It was black. Is typically what you would see in something very old or dead. The DNA tests haven't been done, but there was something odd in the other one from Peru where the S14 DNA sequence was done on the pathology, on the brain matter. Brain matter turned out to be 99.9% human with a 1% error due to some degradation of the tissue. They couldn't get the full sequence out. I'm not a geneticist, but I do know a little bit. And the the sample that supposedly came from the hand on the dead body came out 100% human. But so we're getting consistent. But then again, there was this thing that nobody was watching nobody was watching the samples being taken. Nobody saw where the dust came from. Can it be faked? Yes. Is it faked? I don't know. So I have a lot of theories about that one. If the same results come from the second body or whatever this is with the osmium.
Papa.
I'm doing a show.
Okay.
No. 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 No, we're doing the osmium osmium implant. There's something dealing either we're dealing this is something that we would see and I've heard about it from old skulls in South America. Around that time, people were jamming people in people's heads for what we would call because they had access, specifically in South America, because they had access to real anesthetics like cocaine and ayahuasca and marijuana and all that. So they were doing some rudimentary surgery. So the osmium plate in there indicates that this thing was probably had injuries, and maybe that's why we're seeing the weird stuff with the legs. I'm still up in the air about it. The C14 dating on the might be off if we're dealing with something. I've said this a couple of times, but I am not an organic chemist. But if we're dealing with a species that doesn't originate from, Terra Sol, or whatever you want to call Earth, we could be dealing with another life form that is a different form of, like we could be dealing with carbon-13, carbon-15, maybe a different isotopic ratio, but I really am not the expert into the isotopes of specific elements. I am not an expert, but which would mean that the carbon dating might not be right.
Yeah, no, I mean, even between star systems, those ratios change. So if that alien is from some other place, you're going to see differences, at that level.
Yeah.
Ratios of elements, that should show up somehow.
Yeah, and there was another thing that showed up in CNN. I don't know if you were on it. I think I forgot to post it here, but they found 470,000 year old wooden structure found in Zambia. That's way before humans. And they were able to. Yeah. They weren't doing radiocarbon dating. They were doing on some other nuclear methods to figure out how old these things were. Because when you start carbon dating things that old, they start becoming inaccurate.
Yeah, I hadn't looked into that one too much, but that would take it way back before supposed civilized.
Yeah, and they found the tools.
Civilization was around, any type of civilization.
Yeah, I could tell from the wood. I could tell what the archaeologist was. I've done carpentry, once upon a time, and I could tell just from looking at the log. This thing was cut, shaved, and had notches in it, just with the other log that was next to it. This thing was cut and put there. For sure. I think that the history of this world is much more complicated and much more completely different than what we think that it is,
Yeah, I get the impression that whoever they are, that let's just call them people, have come and gone several times on this planet, whether they were like us before or aliens, but there was somebody else here before several times.
Yeah, exactly. There's been
I don't know how to say it other than that. There's something going on. But that's my
every
best way to say it.
every 200 million years or so we get smacked by a bunch of rocks, and it has to deal with a pre Earth formation. There was what we call the called the something meteor group. It's called the Taurus, the Taurites or something meteor group, and it's remnants from our something. So there was like a third planet or something that was here in between us and the moon, and they think it's a leftover collision. And every 200 million years, one of those things comes in our way, a big chunk of it, and fucking wipes out everything. Every 200 million years or so. It's already happened 5 times.
Yeah, that's a much
Unfortunately.
longer time scale.
If we're talking a 99% genetic match from something not of this planet, I mean that's pretty substantial considering you know 99% of the elements on another planet aren't going to be identical. I think that's that exposing quite a bit here on either origins or something with space-time ratio or interdimensional travel or something of that nature. It blows my mind that with degraded samples, we're still getting a 99% match. That's insanely substantial.
Yeah, that was from the ones that we found. Now, these new bodies, we have to figure out. At first, I thought they were fake. Like I was just like everybody else, and the more I'm digging into this, the more I'm like whatever. And then once we get the DNA and the other MRI stuff done, we can get into that. But if the hand is showing 100% match and the brain tissue is showing 99% match, and they are real, then we get into some really crazy questions, like you're saying, like time, space, and distant relatives. Like life will mutate based on its surroundings, and there's enough evidence around that. But we haven't seen it in our lifetime, because we don't live long enough to see it. But we do see it when we dig up the bones, when we got the other versions of Homo sapiens. But we're not 100% sure about that. But there were different environmental conditions when 100 million years ago, than there was, or sorry, 100,000. Sorry, not 100 million. There wasn't. We haven't found any humans that old, but the oldest humans, Homo something, whatever it is, we found was like 700,000 years old. And there was probably more oxygen. It was, let's just say pre-ice age. There was probably more air and more oxygen, probably a little more nitrogen in our atmosphere, and less carbon dioxide. So things were bigger and probably more bulkier, just like the dinosaurs were. But yeah, we get to start getting some weird. Like I'm saying, like if this thing is us, where the fuck was it living to become like that? You know what I'm saying? That's what twists my mind.
Well, that's almost like a genetic defect. Then, that could be some person born, never lived very long, so it would be a human that's just really misfigured.
That would correspond to the mobility issues that I've suspected. Either it was, but the osmium plate, that's a new one. That would protect the rib cage. But ribs generally don't need surgery. Unless you had unless you really fractured it up. It looked like the thing had medical conditions, So I wouldn't throw that. I wouldn't throw that out there,
It sounds like a potential result of some type of medical service. That they do different things when they crack open your sternum for, heart operations and something like that. And there's really no way to assess, but type of medical provisions are given in another realm or on another planet. The options are endless there.
Speaking of realms, So we've talked extensively on this show. I don't even really want to get into the NASA stuff. Like NASA, the NASA thing stunk, and that is about is all I can tell you. You can read the 30-page PDF about how they didn't do shit. Really.
But the investigation's over.
No. It's preliminary. It was a preliminary thing about what they're going to do, and what they think that some of the things are, and how they're only going to use unclassified data and not classified stuff. When we know that the director has seen the classified stuff, we know that NASA has a history of we call it never a straight answer. So we know that they know that they're lying, but they're playing this. Let's start from square one. But anyway, so I'm just glad that they're doing something, but it's a waste of money because I know it's going to go nowhere. But it's great, that they're looking for it because that's what the public wants. But I was listening to somebody talk this week, and I thought that, the gravity drive was the only way that these things are coming here, like what Bob Lazar was saying, which isn't wrong. It isn't a wrong theory because we don't know. I mean, for all we know, because Bob didn't develop the theory that had happened and actually happened from what he described, some Russians that were working on the base at S4 had a eureka moment, about the gravity A and gravity B and the anti-gravity degradation causing a small gravitational force, but it does contradict with what I did hear, where I am 100% certain that these things are using particle accelerators, right? It without a doubt. It's high energy. The metal surrounding it is giving out plasma. We're dealing with something with high electrical fields. But I heard a theory. This is like pre-string theory about Kluser-Klein theory and the Kluser-Klein particles, about how there are these multi-dimensional. There's more than just three-dimensional space. There's actually 4 dimensions in our things. We do have time, but there is a distinction between what I'm talking about and like 4-dimensional space. So what I'm specifically talking about is Kluser-Klein particles, and that the other part of the graviton, which is a hypothetical particle that might not exist in 3-dimensional space. Like, that's one thing we're not certain of. We're not like, even Bob was not sure about. Like, once you get into the nitty gritty about what gravity actually is, it gets really complicated because we don't have any answers. But he was saying that the graviton would be in higher dimensional space. That's why we're not finding the particle when we're looking for it. But what you could do, right, is you could get a Kluser-Klein particle and through a particle accelerator, and surround an object, specifically something made out of some really strong metal. Surround your ship from it, and essentially you'd be able to punch in and punch out a 5-dimensional space and pop up somewhere. Take shut down the particle accelerator and pop out somewhere else in 3-dimensional space. So, the more I heard it, like what Bob was saying, with a gravity drive, you could probably get to here to Alpha Centauri in maybe 5 days. We're talking this way, hypothetically, like 22 minutes. And all it's doing is creating exotic particles that exist in 5-dimensional space, because essentially the Kluser-Klein particles, they like self-annihilate each other. But there's evidence to suggest that it doesn't 100% exist in 3-dimensional space. It probably exists in 5-dimensional space. So if you were able to manufacture this shit on the fly with some sort of atomic device that would have enough power to pump that juice. That's why I think most of these things are radioactive, because they are using some sort of radioactive element as their fuel to power these things. But it would explain a lot of what people are seeing. How they say these things are camouflage, but you would expect like the waviness and the see-through and the not quite here and the not quite there with both of these theories. But I never thought about these things punching in and punching out of a dimension by using exotic particles. That just blew my mind.
But that
Yeah, I
be
don't.
like
I don't
just punching a hole through space time and coming out like the folding the paper experiment.
A little different. So if you're in multi-dimensional space, it's like it's here. It's like in the same space that you and I are, right? But in string theory, there are these little itty bitty vibrating strings, and you'd have to have something pretty strong to separate that barrier. If you were able to separate that barrier without causing an atomic destruction by, let's say, manufacturing a particle that is in 5-dimensional space and can come into our space, if you do it under the right conditions, you could punch in and punch out. Let's say that 5-dimensional space is much smaller than our universe. You would quicken the distance, and let's just say you would quicken the distance between here and there. I know that it's a mind fuck, and I don't know like everything. I don't know the 100% the physics about it. I am not like the physics bachelor, but that's what I heard, and like I was just like, if that's the case, these guys might not be more advanced than these guys might only be a couple, like what Bob said, a couple hundred more years more advanced than us. That's just stuff like that's around the corner.
Well, I could see how the particle might be able to transverse, between, if what you're saying was true, it could transfer between the dimensions, but how would that drag you in the three-dimensional world in with it?
I don't know. I wasn't
Yeah.
able to ask the guy, but that kind of blew my mind, though. Like, just if you could build an object to trap the particle, he was saying something like it's not a coincidence that we see certain shapes within the UAPs that we're seeing, spheres, tubes, long elongated isosceles triangles, something that you would need, kind of the shapes that you would need for a particle accelerator. But if you had the right engineering, I could kind of blow that theory out of the water. You could kind of make a particle accelerator using any shape, a cube or whatever. It just had to be big enough. Or
Well, you usually need like, a circular or some kind of long distance, at least in the way we do it, to be able to accelerate something to those speeds.
yeah,
You either have to go round and round to get there, or, some god awful, straight line accelerations. But
yeah. They said the same thing about computers, and then 100 years later, we shrunk them down to, you know, the fact that Tic
yeah,
Tacs.
yeah, that's true. I can't envision it being micro sized at that, to that level where you could, have it on some kind of craft. But
That's what I was thinking too. Because
maybe there's a way.
there has to be a way.
You're involved in such high energy. There has to there. If the hotter it's going to be, losses just it's impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, do the particles actually have to accelerate to a high speed, or do they just have to vibrate at a high frequency rate? And if so, could there be a stasis created to suspend this matter in such a way where it can vibrate, and the resonance of that vibration is what ripples out and causes the effect?
Um, I'm not an expert. I'm just repeating what the guy said. It just kind of blew my mind. And a lot of what he was saying was like theoretical, but it kind of blew my mind. And I think I'm going to spend the next few weeks digging into that. Just like, I never thought, I always thought that they were using some form of particle accelerator or some sort of cyclotron. A cyclotron is like, would be like a mini, would be like a mini particle accelerator. They're just not as big. Um, Hell, Bob Lazar had one in his backyard or in his house for a while. Um, I even heard cathode ray tubes are rudimentary particle accelerators. Actually, um, am I wrong on? Oh, Alamo.
I think he just dropped.
Uh oh. Alamo. Oh god. Well, anyway. Yeah, I could only do a half an hour show anyway. That really sucked. We just lost our co-host. Oh god, he probably had a brownout or whatever. Yeah, let's go on to the NASA thing. So NASA was the preliminary thing. I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that they were saying. They did admit that they don't they don't know what these things are. The director said that verbatim. The thing is that we're delving into a realm where it's not it's not in the public interest to start saying what it isn't before we know what it is what it is. Yeah, but that was the same thing Arrow got into. You know, when they started going up, they were saying what these things weren't before. We saying we don't know what they are. I think that we are being lied to. They already know what these things are. If we have reverse engineering programs, we got the bodies. They know what these things are. They're just playing stupid, or they don't have access to the special access programs that these whistleblowers are coming from. And then we had Stephen Greer saying some more bullshit this week about what was he saying? Something about along the other. He was saying something along the lines of. God, I didn't even listen to it, but all I know was more bullshit. I completely forgot. It was something about those strike. I know it was along the lines of those strike teams that he was saying and whatever, but he's starting to sound to me like a drug addict or something because everything he's saying is like crazy as a $3 bill.
Yeah, when we start talking about the unknown and continue down those rabbit holes, we can get a little unhinged along the way.
Yeah, I think Stephen Greer mixed it up with some cocaine along the way and screwed up his mind. He's 100% nuts. Okay, and my kid's about to cry, so I'll have to end it out there. I won't be back next week, but I'll be back the week after this one. Okay.
All right.
All right,
Take
Neezer.
care.